Okay, so we're up to Reish Ayin Vav Seif Dalet, talking about all the halachas of a ner shehidlik any Yehudi b'Shabbos, of a light that a non-Jewish person lit on Shabbos, what we can do about that, can we benefit, etc., etc. So it says the Machab in Seif Dalet, Im yesh ner b'Beis Yisrael, if there is a candle or a light in a Jewish home, u'ba in a Yehudi v'hidlik ner acher, and then the guy comes and he lights another candle. So how do you deal with that? You're allowed to benefit from the extra light that the Eina Yehudi has lit, so long as the first candle, which has been lit by a Jewish person, is still alight. But once the first one goes out, then I can't benefit from the light, which is the second one, which the non-Jewish person lit. And so too, let's say you've got a bowl of oil, and it was already lit, and then the guy comes and he adds some oil to it. So too, if the first, if the oil originally was going to, last for an hour, and he comes to add more oil for another hour, so the first hour would be okay. The second hour you can't benefit from that light. Says the Ramah, that it's you're allowed to sort of protest for the Eina Yehudi who comes to do this, to add to existing light. Okay, says the Mishnah Berurah Sifkat Lamed Beis, Mutter. So again, what are we saying? You can't benefit from a light which has been lit for a Jewish person on Shabbos, but if there is an existing light and the non-Jewish person comes and is Moisif Ner, then you're allowed to benefit from that. Says the Mishnah Berurah Mutter, Rotzolema, after Ato Al Yidei Haner Hazeh Shehidlik B'Shvil Yisrael, Niskadel Ha'ar Yoseh, there is more light. Nevertheless, it's mutter. So long as you can, you could benefit still from the first one. It wasn't so pale, the light, that suddenly it's illuminated the whole room. But then you better still benefit from the first one. And therefore it's okay. But otherwise, if the second light is so overwhelmingly powerful that it sort of subsumes the first one, then otherwise it would be also. To tell the non-Jewish person to light, that of course is not allowed. Now, he asked an interesting question. If you look at note 50 in the second paragraph, he says this: So what do we said over here? We've said that if you've got a light which is already on, and the guy comes along and adds on a second light, you're okay. But he says over here in Shin Chav Zayin, the second paragraph in footnote 50, he says, Masha osel lekaman es hashimish ben alayim shesichsem nochri avur b'Shabbos limrois shegam b'liach sichsuch tefet lishtamish bohem. So he's got a great question. You got shoes which you could wear on Shabbos, and then the non-Jewish person comes along and polishes them. So the halacha says in Siman Shin Chav Zayin that they're also to wear it, because you're benefiting from what the non-Jewish person did. So why is this any different over here? Previously, I've got the level 1, shoes I can use. The guy comes along and polishes them. All of a sudden, I can't use them. Why is this any different? There was light there. I can use that. And then the guy comes and does something and lights the second light. Then it's mutar lishtamish. So what's the chiluk? Very interesting. Since the polishing is in the actual shoe itself, I'm benefiting directly from the melacha done by a non-Jewish person. If he adds an additional light, I'm not benefiting from the actual thing. Maybe I'm actually using the original light and not the second light. There's a second distinction. When it comes to the lighting, his kavana is that there should be illumination even after the first candle goes out. Not for the extra. So long as the ner is light, I'm not really benefiting from him. Masha'en kain, but Masha'en kain with the polishing of the shoes, that's the actual benefit. Okay, just an interesting ha'ara. Lamed Gimel. So back to the Mishnah Berurah. So we said that you're allowed to benefit from the additional light that the guy has lit, but once the first candle has gone out and the sole illumination is what the Nochri did, then it's also lishdamish. Says the Mishnah Berurah Lamed Gimel, v'cheinim hoysem medura shenidlakom erev Shabbos. So too, if there was a fire that was lit on erev Shabbos, uboyin Yehudi v'hoysef eitzim b'Shabbos b'Shvil Yisrael, and he comes along and he throws a few logs into the fire, same rules apply. Let's say the first wood was going to burn for an hour, and because of the extra logs thrown in by the knocker, it's going to burn for another couple of hours, so then you can't benefit from that. But before, whilst the original wood is there, then I'm allowed to enjoy that if I need to. Lamed what is this going on? So if there was a bowl of oil and the Jewish person lit it, so then I can benefit, of course, from that. But if the guy comes along and adds oil, so we said I can only benefit if the first oil was going to last for an hour, so I can benefit from then, but not afterwards. Says the Mishnah Berurah Muta, Af al yedei nesinas Hashem nitoisef, even though by putting oil in you're going to increase the flame. Or if he benefits, improves the wick, or with some other way that is actually going to produce better light, and he does that for the Israel. After even though of course I can't instruct him to do that, nevertheless, if he went and did it, then I can benefit from the light. Because remember, there wasn't some original light that was lit in a kosher way, so therefore I can benefit from it. Lamed Hey. What is this? Yeah, this is the Ramah. I can protest against him. Says the what was the Havamina? Why not? Well, of course you can protest. What's the Havamina? Says the Mishnah Berurah Lamatei, the Sal Kedai Techamina I might have thought you should be strict. Maybe you just don't mention lighting hadlaka at all, and maybe I shouldn't tell him. Maybe I shouldn't say to him, stop, don't light this, because I shouldn't mention it at all. Kamash Malon, that you should tell him to do that. Or it's mutter to. Limchais, says the Mishnah Berurah Lamed Vav, and once I've protested, and I've expressed that I'm not happy with you doing it, if he nevertheless goes and does it, so in other words, once I've said to him, no, please don't put on the light, and he then goes and does it, that shows that he's doing it for him and not for you, because I told him I don't want it, and then I can benefit from it, because he's avidah denafshe, he's doing it for himself and not for me, and therefore that would be okay. Even if it's my wood and my candles, etc., still, so long as it's a genuine mecha, and you're not sort of, it's not a ruse. Okay, lahadlik. What is this going on? He shouldn't. That you protest against any Yehudi who comes to light this extra candle. Dafka kashanesh le any Yehudi. Avol kashanesh le Yisrael. Tzarich nimchis ba kashereh sheretz lahadlik ner lahisif shem b'shvilei. V'chana b'sif katan yudalev ayin sham. If it's Jewish candles and Jewish oil, then you have to. It's not mutter limchis. You have to protest. Okay. Hey, let's finish off the simon. Says the Mechaber. Sif hey. Ba'artzes chorus, in cold climates, it's mutter for a non-Jewish person to put on a fire for ketanim, for kids, and adults can benefit from that. And even to ask a non-Jewish person to put the heating on, if it's very cold, that would be allowed. Why? The famous phrase, Shakol cholim etzel hakar, or in some of the Gemara calls it Shakol cholim etzel hatzina, because everyone feels it. Everyone is considered a choyle, an ill person, when it comes to the cold. And not like those people who are meir heta, they're sort of mekel when it's not that cold, and therefore there isn't really a heta. And that's very important to know. If it's very cold and your heating's off, to go and tell a non-Jewish person to do a malacha deraisa, i.e. to put the heating on or to switch on or do something like that, that's allowed. Why? Because Amir al-Akum is a drabanon, and b'makom chayli le gozerboy. You're a well person, but makom tzina kol chayli. When it's very cold, you'll catch a fever or flu or something, and therefore it's allowed. Okay. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Lasos Medura, Sivkot Lametres, Vuadin Lahasik Tanur Bebeis Cherif, and so too to put on the light in the winter, in an oven in the winter house. They used to have their ovens there in this Beis HaCherif. Umatorin HaGedolin, and if the non-Jewish person put on the heating, made a fire for Ketanim, then the Gedolim can benefit from it. Which is allowed, then that's okay. But if it's done for both Ketanim and Gedolim, that's not allowed. Mutter, this is going on. Yeah, that if it's Kar Gadol, if it's very cold, then you're allowed to tell the non-Jewish person to put the heating on, even for the Gadol. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Sivkot Mem, Rotzolema da afilu loima beferish b'Shabbos lahasik. In other words, by the way, you don't have to be merames. That's what the Mishnah Berurah is saying. Some people get confused sometimes. You hint in this. There are specific situations when you've got a hint, but more often than not, if you're allowed to tell the non-Jewish person to do it, you can just say it normally. Generally, that's the rule. And here's a good example. So you're allowed to tell the non-Jewish person to put the heating on. So you go out into the street and you get a non-Jewish person to come in and to put the heating on. You can, in this situation, you can just tell him straight, please, can you press this button? Please put the heating on. It's very cold here, etc. Mem Aleph, Gadol, an adult, the belav hochi ein derech gedolim litztar kol kach. Because generally speaking, adults don't feel the cold that much. If you look at 52, the question is, how do you, for regular cold, you can tell him for a child. For kar gadol, it's very cold, you can tell him even for adults. So how do you define kar gadol? It's a difficult thing to define. So he says in 52, v'hashir shel kar gadol, the measure of kar gadol, kosav b'shai l'shuvas eretzion, hashir kushamayim b'chutz kaifim. That's pretty cold. Yeah, that means where it's the water's going to freeze outside. That's probably more relevant. That where a person will get sick if it's very cold, he'll catch a cold. It's very hard to give exact definitions and parameters. And moreover, not everyone is the same. Some people, you see some people, they don't own a coat. Even when it's freezing outside, they walk along in shirt sleeves. I know people like that. They just don't feel it. And some people feel the cold a lot. So, it's very subjective. What's also very interesting, if you carry on, this is also a big question. What if the aircon's on and you're cold because of the aircon? So here's the opposite. So if you look at the next paragraph, well, the Indian Misha Hidlik Mazgan Merev Shabbos, they put the aircon on before Shabbos. So Shabbos Hishtan and Mezeg Aviv and Yakar, and then suddenly, on Friday afternoon it was very hot. Here in England you can have 4 seasons in one day. So it's very hot on Erev Shabbos, and all the aircon is on. Come Shabbos morning, it's a bit cooler, and then suddenly you walk into shul, it's freezing. So ve'eni yochel lisbo leskar hamazgan, kosu b'shal shuv zigrus Moshe sheyochel lem lenochri lechabes hamazgan. So you're allowed for the same svara. You're allowed to tell the guy to turn off the aircon. Kivin shakol chelim etzalsina v'davka b'bayis prati shein lebalabayis mokum acher l'sheisbay. Havis agnes is also lema lechabes, unless but in the shul it could be different because he can go daven somewhere else. But if he can't daven somewhere else, then it would lechera be okay. All right, let's go back to the Mishnah Berurah. Mem base shakol chelim v'mikol mokum. Lahasik acha mincha b'Shabbos sheyelemotzi Shabbos also. To tell the non-Jewish person to do it late in Shabbos afternoon so that I've got a nice warm house on Motzei Shabbos, that of course is not allowed. Because it's already warm from the morning. Now it's cooler, it's become cold in the late afternoon on Shabbos. For late Shabbos afternoon it's gone a bit cold, that's not really enough. We're talking about the night time and the early morning. It all depends very much on how cold it actually is. Telling a non-Jew to put on the mazgan on Shabbos, the other way around, if you look at 53, he says, is to put on the air conditioning in the summer. People generally struggle with heat more than with cold. At least with cold, you wrap yourself up, you can dress warm, and you can overcome that. But in the heat, people struggle with that. So based on that, the Minchas Yitzchok, the Ein Weiss, paskins that it's mutter to tell the non-Jewish person to put the aircon on when it's very, very hot. Okay, back to the Mishnah Berurah Mem Gimel. Etzel hakar, hakol cholim etzel hakar, v'tzorich lahachim mibayjoin hapachom mishu mizmonim b'Shabbos lifnei Yehudi ki osel Yisrael letaltalam b'Shabbos lachnisam b'lefonov. Back in the day when you had coal fires, you got to bring in the coals and have it all ready that you shouldn't be metaltal, you shouldn't touch all this stuff on Shabbos. V'lo ka'isam, and a person shouldn't be makel on this. And the Mechaber finishes off. Lo ka'isam shenagim ha'hetza afal pi she'en hakar gadol b'yemahu. Says the Mishnah Berurah, "V'lo ka'isa mikol makom mem daled mikol makom ein limcha yitzbohem the mutzav shiu shogim v'alim mezidin." They shouldn't be mazid. If you look at the last 54, v'dafkim bevadei yikabel menu, avol b'sofik im yikabel menu kazel l'kamen shem mechuyev limchos. If you they will listen to you, you think they'll listen to you, then it's worth protesting. She'ein hakar gadol, in a situation where the car is not that extreme, then you shouldn't. V'al kol ponim yizaru shlo lemele b'Shabbos lahasik ilasus medura. To put on a fire to make a sign like that. Ela sheyikvetzu imoy b'kablonos sheyasik lo yikolim eis acherif be'eis sheyakar. Rather, just tell the caretaker that you make a contract, you pay him an X amount per year, and then he should put on the heating whenever it's cold. And then, even if it's not so cold and he still puts on the heating, and then you won't have to leave the house. He's doing it midaita, he's doing it on his own volition. Okay, so that's a very important halacha. In cold climates, for children, when it's mildly cold, you're allowed to tell the non-Jewish person to put the heating on Shabbos, and when it's kar gadol, when it's really quite cold, either that it freezes over outside, or you might get sick, then you're allowed to tell the non-Jewish person expressly to put the heating on Shabbos, because hakol cholim etzel hakar. Okay.